ever felt that gut-wrenching despair when your beloved houseplants, which flourished all summer long, suddenly start turning yellow, dropping leaves, and generally looking miserable the moment winter arrives? You think you're following your usual routine, but something is clearly off. Statistics show that nearly 80% of indoor plants don't survive the winter precisely because of common care mistakes, errors we often make with the absolute best intentions. In this video, we're going to break down the 20 most common, often fatal mistakes that are silently killing your plants this winter. I guarantee that by the time you finish watching, you'll look at your indoor garden with a completely fresh perspective and be able to rescue even your fussiest green friends. On that note, tell me right now in the comments, which plant gives you the most grief during the winter? Let's find out which species tops the charts for being the biggest divas. Before we begin our troubleshooting session, let's take a moment to really think about what winter means to an indoor plant. It's not just the cold weather outside. For a plant whose natural home is the tropics, winter inside our homes is an absolute apocalypse. You have short daylight hours, the extreme dryness blasted by central heating radiators, cold drafts seeping in from windows, and our own irresistible urge to help and fertilize them. The plant is trying desperately to go dormant, to slow all processes down, but we, conversely, are trying to force it to wake up. This critical disconnect between what the plant truly needs and what we insist on giving it is the root cause of the vast majority of winter struggles. Simply understanding this fundamental principle is already half the battle won. Now, let's move on to those specific mistakes. Let's start with mistake number 1, which is arguably the biggest killer of indoor plants during the winter. It is overwatering. We think we are nurturing them, but in reality, we are slowly drowning our green friends. This is a classic case of killing with kindness. Why does this happen? In winter, due to the lack of light and heat, the processes of photosynthesis and growth slow way down. The plant needs significantly less water than it does in the summer, yet we often stick to that same summer watering schedule. What happens inside the pot? The excess water stagnates, pushing vital oxygen out of the soil. The roots literally suffocate and begin to rot. Then you see yellowing, droopy leaves and think, oh no, my plant is thirsty, so you water it even more. This creates a vicious, fatal cycle. So, what's the correct approach? Forget the schedule entirely. Before every watering, stick your finger about an inch deep into the soil. If it's dry there, then water. If it's still damp, put that watering can down for another couple of days. It is always better to slightly underwater a plant than to drown it. Picture a wet sponge where no air can circulate. That's exactly how your roots feel in waterlogged soil. However, there is an equally destructive opposite extreme: insufficient watering. Some people, after hearing all the warnings about the dangers of overwatering, swing too far the other way and turn their pots into a veritable Sahara desert. While a plant can survive a short period of drought, a constant moisture deficit leads to the death of the fine, absorbent feeder roots. When you finally catch yourself and drench the dried-out soil mass, here's what happens. The remaining larger roots cannot efficiently absorb the water. What's more, dry soil often shrinks and pulls away from the pot walls. The water simply drains straight through the sides without properly wetting the root system. The plant continues to suffer from thirst even after you water it. Leaves become dry and brittle, and the tips turn brown. To avoid this fate, water regularly but moderately. And if you have let the soil get completely parched, do not pour a huge amount of water on it immediately. Instead, place the pot in a tray or saucer of water for about 30 minutes to an hour so that the soil ball can evenly soak up moisture from the bottom. The third common mistake involves water temperature. Watering your plant straight from the tap with icy cold water is pure shock therapy for the root system. Imagine being hot and sweaty and someone dumps a bucket of ice water over your head. That's essentially what your plant experiences. When the roots are sitting in relatively warm soil, that sudden temperature drop causes massive stress. This weakens the plant dramatically, making it much more vulnerable to diseases and pests. The roots can actually suffer damage, sometimes referred to as thermal shock, leading to partial die-off and disrupting the entire plant's ability to absorb nutrients. This cold shock is especially dangerous for tropical varieties like orchids, ficus plants, or marantas. They are simply not genetically designed to handle that kind of temperature challenge. So what's the fix? Always use water that's close to room temperature. Just fill your watering can a few hours beforehand and let it sit out. During this time, the water will warm up perfectly, and any chlorine that might be present, which isn't great for delicate roots either, will naturally evaporate. Let's shift our focus now to the biological clock of plants. During the winter, most of them naturally enter a period of dormancy. This is a natural process, very similar to hibernation in animals. The plant slows down its metabolism and growth in order to cope with unfavourable conditions, shorter daylight hours and cooler temperatures. Ignoring this crucial period is a serious mistake. Too many plant owners make the critical error of trying to actively stimulate growth during this time. They water heavily, apply fertilizer, or move the plant to the brightest spot they can find, hoping to encourage new leaves. But instead of lush greenery, they end up with stretched, weak, and pale growth, often called legginess. This forcing causes the plant to spend its last reserves just trying to survive, rather than accumulating the energy it needs for a strong growth spurt. This severely depletes its resources, making it far more susceptible to pests and disease. Respect your plant's right to rest. Cut back on watering significantly. Stop feeding entirely until spring, and if you can, move it to a slightly cooler location. Let it rest now, and come spring, it will reward you with vigorous growth and beautiful blooms. The next common mistake, over-fertilizing, is closely linked to the previous one. During winter, the logic that more fertilizer equals better growth completely fails. As we've established, your plant is mostly dormant and uses almost no nutrients. All the fertilizer you apply during this time simply sits in the soil. It isn't absorbed. Instead, it accumulates as salts. Over time, this salt concentration becomes so high that it causes chemical burns on the roots. This condition is often referred to as substrate salinization or severe salt buildup. You might notice a white or yellowish crust forming on the surface of the soil and sometimes on the inside of the pot. The plant's leaves start to yellow and dry out around the edges, mimicking symptoms of thirst, even though the soil is clearly moist. That's a sure sign you've overfed your plant. Here is the golden rule. For most indoor plants, forget about fertilizer completely between October and March. The only exception is for plants that actively bloom during the winter, but even for those, you must cut the recommended dosage in half. The winter windowsill is a place of contrasts and often hidden dangers for your plants. The main culprit is the cold. Placing a pot directly onto a cold surface, be it stone, tile, or plastic, can cause severe root chilling, essentially giving the roots hypothermia. Even if your room is cozy and warm, cold drafts near the glass can dramatically drop the windowsill surface temperature, sometimes leaving it barely above freezing. When roots are constantly cold, they become dormant. They stop functioning and are unable to absorb the water they need. The plant then starts to wilt, even though the soil in the pot might feel perfectly moist. This wilting is often mistaken for underwatering, leading people to give the plant more water. This is a fatal error as the cold, waterlogged soil creates a perfect environment for root rot. So, what's the fix? Simple. Create a thermal barrier. Place something insulating directly under the pot. A scrap piece of styrofoam, thick cardboard, a small wooden trivet, or even a stack of old magazines will do the trick. This simple action creates an essential air gap, or buffer layer, protecting the sensitive roots from the icy surface below. Take a moment to check the temperature of your windowsill right now. The results might genuinely surprise you. However, the windowsill presents another serious threat: the heat rising from central heating radiators. Placing a plant right next to the radiator is practically guaranteed to dry it out. The hot, dry air flowing up from the radiator acts like a blow dryer on the foliage. This harsh environment rapidly desiccates the leaves, causing the plant to lose moisture far faster than the roots can possibly absorb it. As a result, you'll see leaf tips turn brown and crispy. The leaves may start to curl, shrivel, and eventually drop off. This is especially damaging for plants with thin, delicate foliage, such as ferns or calatheas. If the spot above the radiator is your only option, you must take proactive measures. You can increase local humidity by hanging a damp towel directly on the radiator, or by placing wide, shallow trays of water near the plant to encourage evaporation. Specialised radiator covers or deflectors can also be used to redirect the flow of hot air away from the plant. And of course, make sure to regularly mist your green friend to help compensate for the intense dryness in the air. Drafts are invisible enemies. We might not even notice them, but for houseplants, especially tropical varieties, a sudden burst of cold air can be devastating. The common mistake is ventilating the room without moving the plants off the windowsill or out of the direct path of air flowing between the window and the door. Even a brief exposure to icy air can send a plant into shock, causing severe chilling and even frost damage to the leaves. They might develop dark spots, turn yellow, and drop off virtually overnight. The plant expends a massive amount of energy just trying to recover from this stress, leaving it severely weakened. Drafts are especially dangerous for blooming plants. They can instantly shed all their buds and flowers. Therefore, whenever you open a window for ventilation during winter, always remove your plants from the windowsill. If removal isn't possible, at least cover them up with a newspaper or a piece of cloth while the air is circulating. Remember, for a houseplant there is nothing worse than sudden temperature swings. The winter sun is a rare and brief visitor, and a critical mistake during this season is failing to compensate your plants for the lack of light. Daylight hours shrink and the weak sun simply doesn't provide enough energy for photosynthesis. Plants start stretching desperately toward the light, resulting in thin, weak stems and leaves that are small and pale. This process is known as etiolation. The vibrant colours of variegated varieties fade, often dulling down to plain green. While the plant won't die immediately, it becomes weak, stops growing, and turns into an easy target for pests. So, what can you do? If you have one, move your most light-hungry plants to a south-facing windowsill. Clean your windows regularly, as dirty glass can block up to 30% of available light. But the single most effective solution is providing supplemental lighting. Today, there are countless grow lights on the market, spanning every power level and price point. Even just a few extra hours of light each day can drastically improve your plant's health and help them survive these dark months without damage. We just discussed the problem of insufficient light, but believe it or not, too much light during the winter months can be equally damaging. We are talking specifically about direct sunlight. While the winter sun isn't as intense as the summer sun, on a clear, frosty day, it can actually be quite treacherous. This is especially true if your plant is placed in a south-facing window. The cold window pane acts like a magnifying glass, intensifying the sun's rays and causing severe burns on the leaves. These typically appear as dry, discoloured, or brown patches. A plant that is already weakened by harsh winter conditions struggles to quickly repair this damaged tissue. Furthermore, bright sunlight heavily heats up the dark pot. This rapid warming, combined with the extreme cold coming from the glass, creates a damaging temperature contrast that is fatal for the roots. Therefore, if you have a very sunny exposure, it is best to provide shade for your plants during the peak midday hours. You can use a sheer curtain, blinds, or even a simple piece of paper taped to the glass. This simple measure will protect delicate leaves from sunscorch and help maintain their attractive appearance. Simple household dust is another insidious enemy of your plants during the winter. When the heat is cranked up, the air in our homes dries out, and dust settles much more aggressively on every surface, including the leaves. We often ignore this greyish film, and that's a mistake. A layer of dust works like a heavy curtain, blocking out the already scarce winter light. As a result, photosynthetic efficiency drops, the plant gets less nourishment, and it begins to weaken. But that's not the only problem. Dust clogs the stomata, the microscopic pores on the leaf surface that the plant uses to breathe and transpire moisture. Disrupting these essential processes leads to overheating and eventual wilting. And finally, dusty leaves are the perfect breeding ground for pests, especially the dreaded spider mite, which absolutely thrives in dry and dirty conditions. The solution is simple and obvious. Give your plants a regular shower. For larger leaves, wipe them down with a damp cloth or sponge. This isn't just about hygiene, it's a crucial part of care that allows your green friends to truly breathe and feed properly. Central heating is wonderful for us, but it's often the downfall of our houseplants. The truth is, it ruthlessly sucks all the moisture out of the air. During winter, indoor humidity levels can plummet to 20 or 30%, conditions you'd normally associate with the desert. Yet most of our beloved indoor plants originate from humid tropical environments, where the humidity typically hovers between 70 and 80%. When the air is this dry, plants actively try to transpire or evaporate moisture through their leaves to cool down. Unfortunately, the roots simply can't keep up with this rapid water loss. As a result, you start seeing the tips and edges of the leaves dry out, turn yellow and curl. The plant loses turgor, that firm structure, and looks perpetually wilted. Even buds and flowers may drop off before they ever get a chance to open. So, how do we tackle this issue? The single most effective method is to invest in a dedicated humidifier. It benefits not only your plants, but also your own health. Other helpful strategies include placing shallow trays of water or moist clay pebbles, leca, near your plants, regular misting, and grouping them closely together. This grouping creates a localized, humid microclimate which is absolutely vital for their survival. When people try to boost humidity for their houseplants, they often make another common mistake. They use the wrong methods. The most popular approach is misting or spraying. It seems simple enough, right? But there are a few crucial caveats. First, the effect of misting is incredibly fleeting. The moisture evaporates in just 15 to 20 minutes, and the air is dry again. To maintain humidity this way, you'd have to be running around with a spray bottle constantly throughout the day. Second, not all plants tolerate misting. For plants with velvety or fuzzy leaves, like African violets or gloxinias, water droplets can cause unsightly spots and even lead to rot. Third, misting a plant that sits on a cold windowsill can actually trigger fungal diseases. Water droplets combined with cold temperatures and poor air circulation create the perfect breeding ground for pathogens. So, if you absolutely must mist, you should only do it in the morning, using a fine mister spray bottle and warm water, allowing the moisture enough time to dry completely before nightfall. However, using pebble trays or investing in a dedicated humidifier is a far more effective and reliable solution. Winter is a time for rest, not stress, and repotting at the wrong time, especially during the winter months, is a major source of shock for any houseplant. Many beginner plant parents make a critical error. They buy a new plant in winter, or notice an older one is root-bound, and immediately rush to repot it. That is a serious mistake. Repotting is essentially a major operation, and inevitably causes damage to the fine, delicate roots. In summer, during the peak growing season, the plant can quickly bounce back and regenerate new root mass. But in winter, when all its metabolic processes are dormant and slowed down, it simply doesn't have the energy reserves needed for that kind of recovery. A plant repotted during its dormancy period can suffer for months, dropping leaves, stalling its growth, or even dying entirely. Furthermore, roots placed into fresh, unestablished soil are much more susceptible to being overwatered, leading to dangerous root rot. So, remember this golden rule. All routine, planned repotting should only be done in the spring, coinciding with the start of the plant's active growing phase. The only exception for winter repotting is in emergency situations, like a severe case of overwatering, where you need to urgently perform a transfer or shift, just to save the roots from immediate decay. Let's move on to another mistake that often becomes apparent specifically during the winter months, using the wrong kind of potting mix or substrate. For instance, maybe you repotted your plant last summer using heavy dense garden soil. During the summer, with high temperatures and lots of evaporation, this wasn't critical. But come winter, that heavy soil becomes a deadly trap. It retains moisture, it compacts, and it holds virtually no air. The roots will quickly suffocate and rot, even if you are watering sparingly. The other extreme is using an overly lightweight, peat-heavy substrate. This dries out extremely fast, especially when placed near a radiator or heat vent. You water thoroughly, and yet the next day, the soil is dry as a bone. These constant cycles of complete desiccation, followed by watering, are incredibly exhausting for the plant. Every type of plant requires its own specific, correctly tailored substrate. Succulents need something loose and fast-draining, often with plenty of grit or sand. Ferns, conversely, need something moisture-retentive but still light and airy. Before you buy or mix your next batch of potting soil, always take the time to research the specific needs of your plant species. The correct soil is the absolute foundation of your plant's health, particularly throughout the demanding winter months. Winter isn't just a challenge for plants, it's a paradise for certain pests. The dry, warm air inside our homes creates the perfect breeding ground for spider mites, mealybugs, scale, and thrips. The biggest mistake we make is letting our guard down. We frequently inspect our plants in the summer, but our attention tends to waver once winter hits. But the pests certainly don't sleep. A weakened plant already stressed by low light and dry air becomes easy prey. They suck the life out of it, weakening the plant even further. It can be difficult to spot these intruders in the early stages. The minuscule spider mite, for example, is often only revealed by a fine webbing on the undersides of the leaves. Mealybugs hide deep in the leaf crevices, disguising themselves as tiny cotton fluff. This is why regular inspection, at least once a week, is absolutely essential. Check under the leaves and examine the stems closely. At the first sign of these uninvited guests, immediately isolate the plant and begin treatment with appropriate pesticides or sprays. During winter, any delay can literally cost your plant its life. Creating a beautiful green sanctuary is great, but the mistake many people make is grouping plants purely based on aesthetics rather than their actual needs. Putting a moisture-loving fern right next to a drought-tolerant cactus is a recipe for disaster. They have completely different requirements for watering, humidity, and light exposure. When you try to create the perfect conditions for one, you inevitably end up harming the other. For instance, consistently misting your fern risks causing rot in the neighbouring cactus. Conversely, providing intense, bright light for a succulent can easily scorch a shade-loving calathea. This mismatched pairing becomes especially critical during winter, when environmental conditions are already stressed and difficult to manage. The key is to group your plants according to their shared requirements. Create distinct arrangements like a collection of succulents or a separate grouping of high-humidity tropical residents. This doesn't just simplify your care routine, it also allows the plants to mutually support each other, helping to maintain a healthy, beneficial microclimate. Whether or not you should rotate your houseplant is a hotly debated topic. However, one definite mistake is abruptly or frequently changing its orientation relative to the light source. A plant isn't a piece of furniture. It's a living organism that constantly adapts to its environment. Its leaves naturally turn toward the light to capture its rays as efficiently as possible. When you drastically turn the pot 180 degrees, you force the plant to expend precious energy trying to reorient its entire leaf mass. For a plant weakened during the winter, this just creates unnecessary stress. On the other hand, never rotating the plant at all isn't the right solution either. It will likely grow lopsided. So how do you find the golden mean? Rotate the pot, but do it gradually. Just a few degrees once every few days. This allows the plant to adapt smoothly without going into shock, ensuring the canopy develops evenly. This is especially crucial for plants with large leaves, such as ficus species or monsteras. The internet is absolutely buzzing with plant care hacks using so-called folk remedies, things like watering with coffee grounds, tea bags, sugar water, or spraying with garlic infusions. Using these methods without thinking it through, however, is a major mistake. Coffee grounds and tea leaves don't just acidify the soil, which isn't right for most plants. They also form a dense crust on the surface that cuts off air circulation. Moreover, when damp, these materials quickly grow mold, which attracts those annoying little fungus gnats. Sugar water, on the other hand, can trigger fungal growth and invite pests, and various herbal or garlic infusions can actually scorch your plant's leaves. Now, I'm not saying all folk remedies are terrible. Some actually do work, but you need to use them intelligently, fully understanding how they work and knowing the specific needs of your plant. Before you grab the leftover morning coffee and pour it into your beloved ficus, take a moment to do some research. It's much safer to use proven, balanced fertilizers and treatments that are specifically formulated for plant use. That's just a much safer bet overall. And the final, 20th mistake, which we can call killing with kindness. This is the panic attack induced by the first yellow leaf. A beginner plant owner notices a single leaf yellowing and immediately panics. They decide the plant is suffering and launch into rescue mode. They overwater it, fertilize it, move it constantly, and spray it with chemical stimulants. This hyperactive care often turns deadly. The plant, which might have simply been shedding an old leaf as part of its natural life cycle, experiences such extreme stress that it actually starts to die. Remember this, it is completely normal for a small number of lower, older leaves to yellow and drop off during the winter. The plant is simply shedding ballast to conserve energy. Before taking any drastic action, observe your plant. Assess its overall condition. If the rest of the leaves are green and firm, and only one or two lower leaves are yellowing, don't panic. Just remove them and continue caring for your plant using the established, low-key winter routine. Sometimes the best course of action is simply to leave it alone. That wraps up our look at the top 20 common mistakes that turn our homes into plant graveyards during the winter. What's the main takeaway here? Winter plant care is essentially the art of benign neglect. Our main task isn't to stimulate growth, but simply to help the plant survive this dormant, difficult period with minimal stress. Less watering, absolutely no fertilizing, protection from drafts, and managing dry air. These are the 4 fundamental principles that ensure your green collection thrives throughout the winter. I truly hope these tips help you avoid those fatal errors and keep your entire plant collection healthy and intact until spring arrives. Thank you so much for watching this video all the way to the end. If you found it helpful, please give us a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future episodes. And now, a question for you. Which of the mistakes we covered was the biggest revelation for you? Or maybe you realised you've been making one of these errors without even knowing it. Share your stories and experiences in the comments below. Let's keep learning together.